intro.
Welcome to Better Business Podcast. My name is Cliff. I am joined here by none other than my wife, Sydney.
And the dog Colt.
Yeah, and our dog Colt, as you can hear him walk by and give us his 2 cents worth on what he thinks life is like as a dog and with business owner parents. The life.
What is the topic for today?
I guess we'll get into it. We are going to be discussing what the main financials of a business are. And I think this is important because I'm hoping by this time some of our audience has gotten that business idea. They're trying to look up stuff, get more involved in what they need to do. And huge part of it, like we've discussed, financials. Not just a business, but personal. In order to, I think, kind of grasp the business concept of, how your business is doing, you have to look at your financials. I mean, they're just a book of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be able to open this book and see what's going on. So I think, with me being an accountant, bookkeeper, I was going to talk about, the main ones.
Okay.
And have you kind of asked me about them.
Okay. Well, let's start it off with what are the main ones?
So the main financials that I think everybody is going to deal with, the statements are the balance sheet,
Okay.
the profit and loss, also called income statement, but usually called P&L, and the general ledger.
Okay.
These are the ones.
Those are the three main.
These are the three main ones. These are the three main ones that you're going to use, and like a bank would ask for, your accountant's going to ask for, your tax accountant. Anybody who needs to look at the financials is probably going to look at these ones.
Okay. And then can you go into a little more detail on what each one does?
Yeah. I'll start with the balance sheet. That's usually the most important one, kind of the main one most people start with. Balance sheet, list out, what the business owns. It's going to start with the assets, and it has its own little equation, of course, because accountants love equations. It has its assets equals liabilities plus equity.
Okay.
And so it all assets will always equal liability plus equity. If it's different, you're wrong. Something's wrong.
So can you kind of describe what is, say, an asset? What is, like, what you were saying for the balance sheet?
Yeah. So an asset is something that the company owns or is owed. This would be, you have your bank accounts. That's an asset. That's something you own that money. You got equipment. Say, for instance, everybody has a computer. They're probably going to have a computer on their books. Some have cars. You have a trucking company that has trucks and trailers. You'll have a cake factory that's going to have ovens, fryers, things like that. And then you're going to have what you're owed, which is most likely going to be your receivables. Or if you lend money out, you're owed money back. So there'll be notes as well. So that's kind of what is mostly included in the asset section of the balance sheet. And then we'll jump over to the other side, and then you have liabilities. So our liabilities is what you owe. Mainly what you just owe. You got credit cards. You'll purchase something on them, but you owe that money towards someone else. So you have to pay that. You got your accounts payable, which is very similar to. And then you got your your loans. If you're a rental company or real estate, probably have a mortgage on your house on the rental. So you have that in your liabilities section to kind of show how much you owe to somebody else.
Okay. And the next one, the profit and loss. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yes. So the profit and loss is the general income statement of your business. This is going to show your revenues, and then it's going to show if you're a product-based company, it'll show your cost of goods sold, and then it'll come down to like more of your expense section. So It'll show you what all you make, what you sell, what your services you have people pay for. For instance, we would have bookkeeping and we have coaching as two separate line items, so we could trace those.
Okay, so this isn't just because I know you said in product based. So this is both product and service based, correct?
Yes, this is going to be all types of companies, and what they serve, services or products. They're going to have profit and loss, and they're going to have the balance sheet. So you just have separate line items for like services. You want to break them out. That way you can help read and see what your financials are doing. Then below, if you're service based, you're not going to have cost of goods sold because you don't have anything that's going to go there. And then the proper accounting for that is you put that right underneath your income for your product. So then you can take it away and have your net profit before you take out the rest of your expenses. So it kind of shows you how well you do on just the cost of items that you're making before you take into consideration other stuff. Service-based business won't have that because there is nothing for them. It's just all expenses will kind of be underneath in the operating section.
Yeah.
So then below, obviously, you have our expenses and accounting, softwares, things like that. They'll add up there, line them out. And then that's when you come up with your, you might have other items, interest income off of a bank account, stuff like that will be there. And then you come with your profit or your loss. So it kind of shows that. Usually it's a nice bolded number or however the reports are, nice and fancy, so it pops out to people. And then you see this, and that total goes over to the equity section of the balance sheet. So that's how those two tie in together. So you should always see the balance sheet with a profit and loss, because the numbers on the balance sheet will be seen on the profit and loss in the equity section. So that's those two, and that's how they kind of relate, and that's how they're important. So
the third one,
yes,
can you go into more detail about that?
Yes, we call this the GL. It's the general ledger. Now, everything about your books and for accounting is in a ledger. This is the old pad and paper. Flip over the giant page, and then you had everything. That was what they used, and that's what they call a ledger. Still used today as the kind of the term, since it's always going to be that way. So this general ledger has a detail of each transaction entered for every account you have on your balance sheet, on your profit and loss. So you can start with your balance sheet and have your general ledger next to you and just go through each account and see all the transactions that came in and out of it and see everything that happened in detail more. So it's kind of like the P&L and balance sheet are a summary of the general ledger.
Okay.
So it gives it more of that detail, more of like, why was this month, why do we have an extra like $2,000? You can go to that account, you can go to that month, and you can look and see the transactions to see why. And then in those transactions, there should be details on what it was, maybe a memo or something about what came in and to explain that. So this is commonly why all these are the main financials. They all flow together. They all give each other, a little extra meaning besides themselves. So that's kind of why they're just the common main financials. And if most people start with them, they can get a great read on what their financials are doing, and they can go into the details. And then if they need to pull other statements, they can.
Okay. Do tax accountants do this, or do the bookkeepers do this?
File them?
Yeah, like the main three.
So it's common for bookkeepers to do these, to get them prepared and everything like that, because you're gonna have the day-to-day stuff in these books, and that's gonna, especially the general ledger, the bookkeeper is gonna know more about that than the accountant, the tax accountant. The tax accountant needs this information to put into the tax return. They don't necessarily need to do all this stuff. There are some tax accountants that do bookkeeping as well, And so they will be involved in that, and then they can just
So
do
it's
it as
mostly
well,
the
but
bookkeeper who does it,
yes,
not the tax accountant.
correct.
Okay.
So sometimes it's actually better to have two, to have a tax account and a bookkeeper. I think it's good because you have kind of two eyes looking at it to make sure, the tax accountant's not doing something or the bookkeeper's not doing something funky with your books and your numbers. They can question each other, but then you also get someone who's more focused on that particular thing.
Mhm.
And so you want your bookkeeper to know how to do all the bookkeeping stuff and probably a little tax so they know how to help you out with that. But then also you want your tax accountant to be best at doing taxes. And he's gonna have to know how to do, he or she'll have to know how to do the books as well. But at the same time, like I said, you want them to focus on your return because you want that to be, get the best bang for your buck from them. So
Mhm.
generally bookkeeping and then the tax accountant.
Do you have any other recommendations on a business trying to do this themselves rather than hiring a bookkeeper?
Yeah, bookkeepers are expensive, and everything in the beginning is expensive. You gotta help that little baby across, and sometimes you're on your own.
Mhm.
There are a lot of softwares out there now, especially now with different revenue streams that they are free. I know one that we use for our clients and ourselves sometimes is Wave Accounting. It's just a simple,
Not sponsored, by the way.
not sponsored, but it is something that I minimally think that people should have because it is set up like a general ledger accounting system rather than just Excel, because Excel can get very confusing and convoluted very quickly.
So would you say that's the number one software that you would recommend, or would you recommend a different software?
I would recommend a different software. We're also not sponsored, but I recommend QuickBooks. I've been using it for 7 years, so I might be a little biased, but I think it's fantastic for almost every industry starting out with. It's easy to go with, and then once they get to the point where they're growing enough, there are industry softwares that they need to go to. But I think every business can start out on QuickBooks and can flourish from there. I do think QuickBooks has really easy to read reports. They're very common. Almost every account knows. You can just look at the report and know it's QuickBooks, and then it's easy to kind of add another account to it, whatever you got to do, especially if it's the online version. And they have, a lot of communities out there, a lot of people who can help you with it. So if you're, struggling on just one part, you probably hire that person for $10 to fix that, and then you can go back to doing it yourself.
Okay.
But if you have another account, like you have a bookkeeper, and you don't like them, they're retiring, they're getting out of the business, it's very easy to transfer to another bookkeeper. So, whereas I think the other software, the minimum one I just suggested, Wave, that one would be maybe your first year at best. Or if you have a business that you kind of just set it and forget it, like you have one rental, you just can do it on there, probably just perfectly fine. But it's at least a software that's going to give you the reports that you need for tax purposes as well.
Okay.
Which, like I said, I think Excel can get pretty confusing pretty quickly. And then it's hard to kind of trace everything back if something happens. And you always want to be prepared for an audit. So
Yeah, because I know I haven't done it in the accounting world, but I used it for budgeting purposes, and our budget didn't always equal the Excel sheet.
yeah, it's very easy to mess up, move one formula on accident, forget to put a plus somewhere, and
Yeah.
then you overlook it or you have to spend hours trying to figure out where that was. Whereas the softwares, they make you enter everything one at a time and then they put it where it needs to be and add it up for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, do you have any more questions about financials, bookkeeping at all? No?
I don't think so.
think-
I try to think of questions as if I was starting out again.
Yeah, I think those are some really good questions to ask. And I think that's a fantastic start for somebody that's getting into this and that's what they're worried about. It's like financials and what do I do? I think this is a great starting point for them to oh, there's 2 recommendations, I can look into this further.
Yeah.
Go from there. So if somebody wants to hire us as a bookkeeper, has questions, maybe you want you as a coach, where can they find us?
We're on bennerstride.com. We're usually open to emails. We're on Instagram, Facebook.
That's right.
Sometimes we respond.
Yeah.
I wish we were better at that, but one of those things,
Yeah.
you gotta find time to do everything, and that's not my priority, but I pass it on to you.
Yep, I check it every morning for us. Do my best to get to it. So, we're on. If somebody's listening to this, they're probably listening on. I think it's Spotify and Amazon. I think we're got on
Cool.
Amazon.
Cool.
And if they're watching it, they're on YouTube.
Yeah.
So
very cool.
we're on quite a bit of platforms, and we're hoping to help people out.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Well, I think that's it.
Signing off. That's a yes.
That's a yes.